Hi, this is Chris, Chapping the Cap, MotoLegends. Today I'm going to be talking to you about a new helmet, a new flip lid helmet from the Italian brand Nolan. It's a helmet that's called the N100-6. Please don't forget that if you like what you hear, if you like what you see, please like the video and subscribe. I've come in for a bit of criticism from customers recently about our decision to offer products that might be considered less than truly premium. And I suppose I understand what people are trying to tell us, namely that you can't sell a Rolls-Royce and a Kia in the same showroom. Well, I suppose you can, but you risk sending out mixed messages when you do so. But we do feel a bit of an obligation to have gear for all types of bikers. If somebody's made the effort to come and see us in the shop, it feels a bit rude not to have something to offer them. And when it comes to helmets, not everybody after all can afford a Shoei, an Arai or a Schuberth, especially if they're looking to upgrade all their other kit at the same time. Now, for us, there is clearly a threshold. We're not going to start offering helmets from the likes of LS2, from Caberg, MT and Airoh, but we do feel the need to have a small range of helmets that sit perhaps a rung or so below Shoei et al. That's why we're going to be enlarging our selection of Nolan Sharks and Scorpions in the coming months. Now, as ever, we're not going to use AI to throw complete ranges up on the website indiscriminately. We'll only pick models we rate and that we think are going to fill a gap in our range. Now, truth be told, we have long been after a good quality flip lid that we felt we could, hand on heart, recommend to our customers if the Schuberth C5 and the Shoei Neotec were too punchy on price. Well, we think that the Nolan N100, in other words this helmet, is potentially just such a helmet. Although we won't be selling Nolan's cheaper N90 because we think that represents simply too many compromises. So what we're going to do here, we're going to talk in some depth about the N100. Now, it's not in any meaningful sense a competitor to the Shoei, it just isn't. But in that the Neotec is the benchmark in this particular market, we are inevitably going to be measuring the Nolan against the Japanese helmet. First thing to say about the Nolan is that it has a shell made from a material known as Lexan. Now, Lexan is a brand name for a type of polycarbonate, although we're told that it's a very superior form of polycarbonate. In turn, of course, polycarbonate is just a fancy name for plastic. Now, such shells perform very well in impact tests because they're softer and they tend to absorb the energy of an impact very effectively. But this softness is less beneficial when it comes to multiple impacts, which of course ECE 2206 does not test for. Plastic shells also tend to deform in an impact, meaning that they don't glance off in the way that an Arai does when you hit the ground. What needs to be understood is that even though all helmets have to pass the 2206 ECE test, that does not mean that all helmets are equally protective. Emphatically, they are not. Far from it. Whilst doing my research, I watched one YouTuber suggesting that polycarbonate helmets need to be swapped out more regularly. I think 3 years rather than 5 years was suggested. I have to say that this is made up nonsense. The N100 comes with a 5-year warranty and will last as long as any composite helmet. Obviously, the distinguishing feature of the Nolan is the lift-up chin bar, but the mechanism for raising the visor moves in an elliptical fashion, meaning that when it's up, it sits closer to the shell of the helmet, certainly closer than it does on, say, the shell of a Shoei or a Schuberth. And I suppose in its own way that's impressive. It makes for a more streamlined profile, but I can't say that it makes much of a difference to us because as far as we're concerned, one doesn't ride at speed in a flip-up helmet with the chin bar up. These are not open-face helmets. In our view, you only raise the chin bar when you're travelling at very low speeds through a town or when you're stationary. The chin bar release mechanism requires a pinching action to operate, but I can't see the problem with that. It seems to work fine. It's a tad fiddly perhaps, but it wouldn't take long to get used to it. There's a locking mechanism for the chin bar as required under 2206. The visor is scratch resistant, but it is not class 1 optical quality, nor is the sun visor. The détente mechanism for the visor is not bad. You've got 4 distinct positions, but the lowest one leaves the visor too raised to be considered to be a crack position. In other words, the edge of the visor is going to be in the middle of the eye. The sun visor has 5 locked positions and a very clever spring release mechanism that sends the sun visor flying up into the shell when you don't need it. There's a neat, quite discreet catch for locking the visor closed, and we think that works well. The helmet comes with a dark visor in the box, but I have to say we don't see the point in a second visor with a helmet like this, with a sun visor. You're never going to look badass in a flip lid helmet, so we personally think that a drop down sun visor should be enough on its own. But there's another issue here if you do decide to wear the dark visor and carry a clear one with you. The mechanism for removing and replacing the visor is not straightforward. In fact, it is darn tricky. Helmet comes with a pin lock, and this is important because the helmet is quite well sealed underneath and therefore fogging could be an issue. Sadly, it looks to be a pin lock 70 and not a pin lock 20, and I have to say that's less impressive. Indeed, there's nothing that says corner cutting, cloth cutting or penny pinching louder than a pin lock 70. Now the venting on the helmet itself seems adequate, but nothing to write home about. There's a single vent on the chin, another one position vent on the brow, and at the back of the helmet there's a permanently open exhaust vent. The interior of the helmet is comfortable without being luxurious. There's a system for adjusting how high or low the helmet sits on the forehead, but we can do nothing to change the size of the headliner or its shape. And although the cheek pads can be removed for cleaning, you cannot change the thickness of the padding in and around the cheeks. Now, the fit of the helmet is actually quite oval. It's pretty similar to the fit on a Neotec, but therein lies a potential issue. The fit will not work on some people, and if the Nolan N100 doesn't work for you, there's nothing you can do about it. You can't get different size cheek pads as we've discussed, and there's nothing we can do. There are no different headliners either. So you can't change the headliners in the way that you could do, for example, with the Neotec, and even to an extent with the Schuberth. Of course, Nolan also doesn't offer anything like Shoei's computerized PFS system. So if when you put the N100 on, you feel any kind of pressure, and I think where you'd feel the pressure, if you feel any pressure here on the side of the head, then move on. This helmet is probably not for you. It's just the wrong shape for your head. Now, very rarely will you be able to solve the problem by going up a size. When you do that, you increase the width here, but you run the risk of the helmet just becoming too loose front to back. One thing we do like about the helmet, however, is its neck roll. Now, clearly the folk at Nolan looked at the Neotec before they put the N100 into production. It's widely accepted that the Neotec is the quietest helmet on the market, and what Nolan will have worked out is that the neck flap that seals the helmet around the rider's neck on a Shoei plays a large part here. And so on the N100, they have basically just copied that design, ditto the chin curtain. So will this make the Nolan as quiet as a Shoei? I'm afraid the answer is no, because Shoei has put a huge amount of effort into addressing all of those other areas where noise is potentially a factor. Nolan, I'm afraid, will not have been quite so rigorous. But I think we can still predict that the Nolan N100 will be a pretty quiet helmet, perhaps just not the very quietest. Now, the chin strap is adjustable from one side only and fastens by means of a ratchet mechanism, a micrometric adjuster as it were. The adjuster, I have to say, feels a little bit flimsy. It works, but it doesn't make that distinctive Volkswagen Golf door clunk sound that leads one to believe that the engineers have laboured over its design. Again, in one of the reviews that I watched on the N100, the videographer suggested that he had noticed that the chin strap on all 2206 helmets sat further back. Well, I'm afraid that's not the case. What he was noticing was something that all flip lids have in common. Because the chin piece on a flip lid is not fixed, the chin strap has to be secured further back than it would be on, say, a full face helmet. And indeed, that can be an issue, especially for those who have a prominent Adam's apple. In essence, if you find that the strap on a flip lid helmet is uncomfortable, you may sometimes, but not always, need to accept that a flip lid helmet doesn't work for you. And I have to say, it is an issue that we come across quite a lot in the shop. Now, comms and flip lids tend to go hand in hand, and that's largely because as flip lids are quieter, comms work better in them. And indeed, the latest integrated comms are very much part of the proposition for helmets like the Schuberth C5 and the Shoei Neotec. And so on one level, it's good to see that Nolan has developed an integrated center comms solution. The problem, however, is that some of the technology that is being employed by Nolan is a little bit below par, somewhat behind the times. Now, Nolan offers three different levels of comms. There's the M951 series, and that's a mesh-only system. The B902 series is Bluetooth only. The B602 is aimed at those who only want rider-to-pillion communications. The mesh system is based on Senna's Spider unit, and that, I've got to say, is pretty much up to date, although it's not what you would call top of the line. but the speakers, whilst 40mm in the Nolan, are not HD as they are with the Spider. And I think that again talks of, I don't know, cost cutting to a degree. Nolan's Bluetooth only system is based on the Sena 10S series, and that's pretty ancient given that now we've moved through the 20 series, the 30 series and the 50 series. Right now we're on the 60 series. The rider-to-rider system is based on the Sena 5 series, but I think that's okay because the demands upon the system are never going to be great. Also has to be said that the switch gear on the control units feels a bit cheap and plasticky, feels as though it's not going to last. It is fiddly to use and I suppose just doesn't have a particularly premium feel to it. So this is where we get to. Nolan's comms offering is not state of the art. The range ticks most of the boxes, although what's missing, it has to be said, is a system that combines both Bluetooth and a mesh in a single unit. But the technology employed by Schuberth and Shoei is much more advanced. And so if comms are important to you, if you want the greatest talk distances, if you want the longest talk times and all the latest features, you should maybe look at the German and the Japanese brands, and specifically the former if you want cardo. Now, in normal circumstances, we might actually recommend that instead of a Nolan dedicated unit, you use something like the Sena powered UCOM units. They are fantastic units, but there's a problem here in that the base of the helmet is so thick that you cannot use a clamp, and therefore that only leaves you the option of sticking the unit onto the helmet. But the shape of this helmet is so curved that it's almost impossible to find an area that's going to give you enough purchase to stick a UCOM unit on, and that's a shame. The Nolan N100, or more correctly the Nolan N100-6, is not a Neotec. It's not even a C5. It's constructed from cheaper materials, and pretty much everywhere you can see why and how the Shoei in particular is a better helmet. But the difference in cost is not insignificant. In fact, it's pretty huge. In white, the N100 costs £320. The Neotec is almost twice as much at £600. Now, in every respect, the Neotec is unequivocally a better helmet, but some bikers can't afford a Shoei, and many don't need what the Shoei offers that the Nolan doesn't. If most of your daily driving, for example, involves potting around town, you do not need a Range Rover. A Kia, a Fiat or something like a Citroen will do fine. The Range Rover would be a waste of money. But if you're somebody who does big miles, you might feel that it's worth paying the premium for more expensive equipment. No two ways about it though. The Nolan offers a lot of bang for your buck. If your budget won't stretch to a Shoei or a Schuberth, and if you do not need the extra functionality that these helmets offer, the Nolan N100 is not to be sniffed at. Well, I hope you found that interesting. If you'd like to see more flipped helmets, more Nolan helmets, or just more helmets, visit the website MotoLegends.com. To learn more about the N100-6 in particular, click on one of the links on the screen. Sometimes they're up there, sometimes they're down there, and that will take you directly to the relevant page on the website, the relevant product page. Now, when you're there, you can check out the spec in a little bit more detail, you can check availability, and obviously you can buy a helmet there and then if that's what you want to do. When you buy from us, we try to make buying as simple, straightforward and risk-free as we possibly can. There's no delivery charge on any item of protective wear, returns are totally free, and what's more, we give you a full 12 months in which to decide whether you do want to return something to us. We have the best price promise in the business. Now, many years ago, John Lewis were rightly famed for their never-knownly undersold price promise. We go one stage better. If you can find anybody selling anything that we sell at a price that is below ours, we will beat that competitor's price by a full 10%. Now, there are a few terms and conditions associated with what we call our price beat. Nothing particularly onerous, I assure you, but if you are going to attempt to price beat us, I suggest you go over to the website and check out what those terms and conditions are. In the future, if you'd like to receive bulletins about new products, then again, go to the website. At the top of the page, there's a piece of script that says newsletter sign up. Click on there. Within seconds, you'll be in business. In future, you'll receive our email bulletins. If, however, you prefer to get your information videographically, that is to say in this form, we'd be simply delighted if you wanted to become a subscriber to a YouTube channel, and you can do that by clicking on the button below. Finally, I'd like to make mention of our fabulous shop at MotoLegends. It's based about a mile from the centre of Guildford, a mile from the railway station, and as I've suggested, it's a small shop. It's got a small footprint, but it is attached to our warehouse where over 3 stories we have more than £4 million of motorcycle merchandise, And technically that makes it the second largest motorcycle apparel shop in the country. But we would like to think of ourselves as far more than just the amount of gear we have in the building. We're all about service, we're all about personal fitting. If you want to check us out, visit Trustpilot. We have the highest 5-star ranking in the business. And what's more, when you come to see us, we'll serve you only the finest Italian illy coffee, or we'll serve you proper Yorkshire tea in a proper teapot. And if you're lucky, who knows, you might even get to sample one of our delicious motorcycle-shaped shortbread biscuits. Anyway, this has been Chris. I hope to talk to you again soon.